Is anybody here a first time at JFL as well, like I am? This is a great conference, right? All right, and thanks to Robert for actually making it possible for us to be here. Robert and Uwe and myself have done this sort of a panel a couple of times by now. And usually I start off by boring everybody to death by telling a short story of how we came together, which is what I'll do again as well. So in the middle you have Uwe Schindler from the Apache Lucene project and Solar at the Apache Software Foundation. On my left, on your right, that's Robert Scholte from Apache Maven at the Apache Software Foundation. And my name is Dalibor Topic. I'm from Oracle, which is not a foundation, right? Okay, and being from Oracle, of course, I brought you a present. The one slide you've seen probably somebody else from Oracle show you today as well, right? If you haven't, take a moment to enjoy it. It's going to be the same all your talks you see from Oracle folks. And then because you're quick readers, so Uwe, do you have a microphone? Yes. What do you do?
I'm part of the Apache Lucene project. That's the search engine library behind Elasticsearch and Apache Solar. And we are doing a lot of stuff with huge amounts of stuff on the file system, and we need to access it in a very, very fast way because you want to get your search results very, very fast, like you see it on Google or in Amazon search. And because of that, we need very and high-performant access to that on the file system. We need to do the scoring and all that stuff. And because of that, we are very, very keen on looking to get Java 9 faster than Java 8.
That sounds like a good goal, right? Faster is better. And then that was the library side of things. On the tooling side, Robert, what do you do?
It's even still in Dutch. So.
That's in Dutch, yes. I lifted it off the website of JFL this morning. I have no idea what it says.
So my name is Robert Scholte. I'm the chairman of Apache Maven. I'm pretty sure everybody heard about Maven. I'm also a member of the JSR 376 expert group. And this JSR is about the module system, that huge thing that is coming together with Java 9. Right?
And I work at Oracle on the product management side, mostly in OpenJDK, where I do this and that, work on the updates, the porters group, and various bits and pieces around these things. And one of the things I want to tell you, of course, is that Java 9 is here. If you haven't heard so far, it's there. You can actually download it. You can, in fact, download OpenJDK binaries at jdk.java.net/9 under the sweet open source GPL license. And so if you haven't done so, you should give those a try and see how your code works under them. You guys have done so, and I think you made some pretty good experiences. But it wasn't always like that. Not too long ago, in the Java 7 days, we released Java 7, and we were happy. And people were happy as well. We had a good launch event and all that. But then it turned out not everybody knew we were actually just about to release Java 7. Some people thought that Java 7 would take a bit longer, if ever. And so only once Java 7 was out did we start receiving feedback on some problems, such as that the GA version actually broke Lucene and Solar quite badly. So they crashed. That was kind of bad. So of course, once we heard about it, we fixed it in the next CPU update. But we thought we probably should avoid going through that again. So when Java 8 was getting feature complete, we thought that it might make sense to actually talk to the people who found interesting bugs around Java 7, such as Uwe from the Lucene team, and maybe ask them to test Java 8 in advance because we knew it was coming and wanted to make sure other people knew it was coming as well and would let us know about the issues they find along the way. And this is how our quality outreach effort started back in 2013. We went with around 20 free and open source projects, Lucene, Maven, of course, Groovy, across the board, trying to both get build tools involved and libraries and JVM languages. And of course, as you would expect, they all found bugs. In fact, I think you found the most bugs, the two of you.
Well, these are old numbers. These are still from 3 years ago.
These are from a couple of years ago, for 8 actually. This is for Java 8. And so the good thing is though, because the bugs were found at feature complete time in the run-up to the GA release, we're able to fix those. And so Java 8 ended up being a pretty good release out of the box, and in fact ended up being adopted in the community rather quickly. And so, encouraged by that success, we expanded the quality outreach effort to try to reach out to more and more open source projects. These days, it's around hundreds of projects that register, that participate, and basically every couple of weeks, get an email from a colleague of mine, Rory, who isn't here today, but he's a very nice guy, and he'll send you an email saying, hello, we have a new build out there. Would you like, to run it through your own regression test suite and let us know if things break? And if things break, then we can try to figure out if this is something that has changed in the JDK meanwhile. So it might be a problem on our side. If it's something that maybe have changed in your code, so it may be something that you may have to fix, or if it's, for example, an environmental issue. And through this dialogue with open source developers and open source communities building on the JDK as library, we were able to, over the course of the past couple of years, get a lot of hairy issues sorted out of the JDK, but also get a lot of good feedback into JDK development. And this program is, of course, open to anybody working open source projects. If you're interested, get in touch with me. I think Uwe and Robert can always let you know how it works. Or send an email to the Quality Discuss mailing list at OpenJDK to join us. And for 9 in particular, because 9 was quite a big bit of work with more than 80 features coming in, of which modules were a large part, but not the only one. Modules necessitated a lot of work under the hood in libraries and in particular in build tools to make sure they're well supported. And a lot of the work fell on the shoulders of people like Robert for Maven to make the various components work well, but also on people like Uwe who made sure that what we produced would actually not crash Lucene, which turned out to be a really good test for Hotspot. And so based on our experiences together, we had our first chat when Java 9 was feature complete back in May at JAX in Germany. Then we met again in Munich for the Java 9 launch. And here we are again, basically just a couple of days after Java 9.0.1 has been released. Isn't that awesome? 9.0.1. This is the next to last release for Java 9, by the way. So I don't think we're doing this very often anymore because we only have one more to go in January, and then we're done with Java 9. But of course, my first question is going to be, we talked a couple of weeks ago that your stuff works on 9. Does it still work on 9.0.1?
I think so.
You think so?
Well, we get not that much issues about Java 9. Last week, somebody said, well, JavaDoc, the Maven JavaDoc plugin, is not working when you add the module descriptor. That's already fixed. It has to be released, and it's really minor things right now. So on the Maven part, we're pretty good.
Okay, and on the Lucene side of things?
Yeah, thanks to the good testing we did before the release of Java 9, we had no specific Java 9 issues, and you could maybe say it's because nobody's using it yet. But for example, because, as I said, with the speed improvements, we advise already all people that are running Elasticsearch or Zola to also go to Java 9 for running it, and it works out of the box. So we did not get any complaints yet about that, so it should work. And since Java 9.01 came out, I think some bugs we have seen before were automatically fixed, but this is a different story. Maybe we come back to that.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's a story of versions. One of the interesting things about 9 was that the version string for 9 was just 9 and nothing else. And so all these programs that expected the version string for a Java release to be, I don't know, something point something else, all of a sudden found themselves without no points. Whoops. But of course, it only took a couple of weeks until 9.01 shipped, and all these things should be fine again. Unless expect to start in one, then of course, somebody has to do something. Speaking of somebody doing something, I saw you've been working on actually adding more tools to support in Maven, like Depperscan.
Yes, Depperscan. I was at Java 1 talking with Martijn Verburg, and he says, I'm still waiting for a new Maven plugin. I have this idea that there's this tool, Depperscan, and what it does, it warns you when you are using deprecated classes. And I think all kinds of things that are marked as deprecated. So I started working on a Maven plugin for that, and I think we will release an alpha version pretty soon. So that's all kinds of things that should make it possible to verify your project right now if it is compatible with these new specifications.
Right, and you already also support JDAPs, I think?
Oh, that's where it all started. I think it was about 3 years ago when we were at FOSDEM, and we had this talk and we saw these numbers you showed. And that's where you said, well, Java 9 is coming, and a lot is going to change, especially the usage of internal packages. People should be warned about it, and wouldn't it be nice if there was a Maven plugin which could already warn you for it? And there's this tool, JDAPs. It's already available in Java 8, but also in 9. Can you make a plugin for it? That should make it a lot easier to adopt that plugin. And it's already there for, I think, over 2 years, and it's working quite well.
Did anybody here use it?
Well
Yes.
done.
Yeah.
Well done. Excellent. Right. So okay, we had JDAPs, we got Depperscan. What about JLink? Can I use Maven to actually link my modules together?
Yes, I think so, but the whole problem is there are all these stories about JLink, you should use it, but there's one major thing that nobody is telling, is that all your dependencies have to be modules first before you can use JLink, and to really make this binary thing. So I don't think it's really a Maven issue. I think it's just having the knowledge of this tool and what it can do.
Okay. And what about Lucene? What did you guys see that worked well for you? Or?
So on the Lucene side, we had a lot of work to do with of course, like he said before, with access to some private APIs, because Apache Lucene is very, very, it needs to be very, very fast. So sometimes we have to hack around, had to hack around some stuff in the JDK. You know, that famous sunmisc unsafe. But we don't use it anymore, only at one specific place, which should go away when there's some bug fix in the JDK coming. Maybe in the next version, 18.3, we don't know. So, but to get to that point, we started with that already very, very early. So we also have a lot of build tools. Unfortunately, we are not using Maven, so we are still building with Ant. But we have something, so we are not running JDAPs, because I think when we started to work on that already in 2011, there was no JDAPs available. Right. So we have another tool that was developed by myself and some other Lucene committer, which is a forbidden API plugin. And this one also scans your bytecode for any method signature you don't want to call. And then we started to remove all that stuff. Of course, it detects that you use a sunmisc unsafe. And the other stuff is, what we did is, because the module system also brings a lot of more security, so you cannot do reflection anywhere by just making everything accessible and all that stuff. So what we also did is we changed our test suites to run with the security manager, to catch all that stuff. So we were also able in Java 7 and Java 8 to figure out if the code, or maybe some third-party library that we cannot look into, that's just linked to our code, is maybe doing something like that. So when you run the tests, you will see that immediately. And now we can, of course, use JDAPs to detect that. And we were upgrading a lot of libraries, fixing bugs with version numbers, and
right.
yeah.
But I assume the upgrading of libraries has come to some to an end now, right? I think a lot of the libraries, at least of the common used one, like Lucene, have been already updated to be Java 9 friendly at least, if not automatic modules outright. Is that something you guys have been looking at?
Automatic modules?
Right.
Well, Maven is on top of a lot of dependencies, so no, not yet. And there's also another reason, because Maven itself is already modular, so and it's kind of conflicting with these new specifications coming with Project Jigsaw. Or we have to make a monolith again of Maven, but that's the contrast, what you actually want. Or we have to completely rebuild Maven following these new Java 9 rules, but that would make every Maven plugin useless. So I don't think we will ever going to do that. So that's about Maven.
Yeah. I think the only reason, for example, if you have an application like Maven, it makes no sense to really make modules out of it, because you can call it. It would only make sense, for example, if you could ship Maven together with a smaller JDK, but as you want to build your project, you would need the full JDK to do that. So, and in that case, for Apache Lucene and Elasticsearch, it's very similar. That in most cases you don't want to modularize that stuff, because there's another problem with that, because the restrictions in Java 9 don't allow you to have the same package in two different jar files, so in two different modules. And the problem is with code, which is very, very old, you sometimes have the same package in two jar files you're linking together. Look, for example, at log4j or something like that. They have the same package names in all their jar files, and if they are all on the class path, it works. But if you make modules out of it, you would need to rename all that classes, which is, of course, a backwards compatibility issue. But on the other hand, do you really need that at the beginning, unless you're starting a completely new project where you know from the beginning that you want to modularize that? So the only way that you could do something like that is make a big module of your whole application, define what dependencies on the internal JDK stuff you have, and then you can run JLink and have a minimal JDK shipped with your application. That's one possibility that I can do at the moment.
And assume if I was writing a new application, I would be starting with modules and using Maven, and it'll all just work. But if I happen to have inherited a sort of legacy application, I assume my first goal would be just to get it to run on 9.
Right.
How should I do this?
I think as long as you stay in the class path, there's no issue. And like you say, it's not an application. And the class path will stay there like forever. So there's no real need to move to the module path or to add module descriptors. If you have this well, maybe a couple of years old, all that applications, just run it as it is. It's stable enough if you use Maven. I think that's also some sort of reliable configuration, and that's good enough. So work like this, and if you start a new application, that's the moment when you have to think about these new Java 9 rules and make your application modular. That would be my advice.
Right. Uwe?
I think when you have a legacy application, try it simply out. If it works by running it in the same way like you did it before, the only thing that could happen is that it crashes because it uses some internal APIs. That's something you see, or it crashes while passing the version number, but then you can update to a 901. And so in that case, you have to try it out, run all your test cases, and if it works, it should be fine. So that would be my recommendation. And for new projects, as you said, just start, look into the modules, try to use them. The only problem you have is that all your dependencies also need to be modules, which could work with the auto modules, but not for all projects out there. There's one thing, for example, I think log4j 1.4 is not working with Java 9. But this one is outdated since, I think, 10 years already.
Yeah, there is a story about Log4j actually that kind of crosses this whole quality stuff, because at some point in time, I think the Log4j team realized that people are using old versions of Log4j, and they wanted them to move off that to the new one. And the old one hadn't been released for, as you say, 5 or 10 years. And so once somebody realized that the old version wouldn't actually parse the version string for 9 anymore, then there was a press release saying, okay, we're done here, end of life of Log4j 1.4, go on moving to Log4j 2. And in fact, the Log4j team did a really good job of approaching other projects at Apache and trying to assist them to migrate to the new version, which is not always as simple as it sounds, because some things have changed. And of course, the people who cannot migrate at all, there are hacks on Stack Overflow, right? There are always hacks on Stack Overflow.
But there's a migration path. So if you have something like a very, very old library still compiled against Log4j 1.4, there's one, just remove the old Log4j dependency and replace it by the wrapper, which is available. So there's a module for Log4j that has the old API, so all your code logging something is working, but it just delegates it to the new APIs of Log4j. So you just have to clean up your Maven dependencies, and then it should work.
Okay. So right, so I get my code to run, I get my tests to run, and hopefully they'll pass. Good. If they don't, of course, I tell Roriger myself. Good. But are there things in 9 I should actually look at using from your experience? Like, are there things which you would say, this is actually good enhancement that I should look into trying out in my code base? Uwe?
To start.
Yeah, so we were looking into using var handles. The reason for that is because we want to need access stuff in huge memory blocks out there. So, for example, to access direct byte buffers directly and all that stuff. So this is something you could look at, especially if you're doing stuff like concurrent updates, for example, on arrays, because currently that's not possible. You need something like those special classes which use reflection and all that stuff to do that. But now with var handles, you can wrap your array with var handles and then do something like atomic updates on a specific index of your array, for example. That's quite interesting. But there are also some internal updates which look really promising. One is the changes in strings. So they take a lot of less memory, and if you compile your code against Java 9 and you concat a lot of strings, it no longer uses a string builder internally. So it has now a good feature which makes it better for the garbage collector to guess how large the string will be once it is concatenated. And because of that, this will improve your application. But you need to compile with the target Java 9 for that.
Right.
Right. Well, I already wrote an article in the Java magazine of the NL Jug, so probably everybody knows this already.
Yeah.
But one of the things I really like is this new release option you can add to the compiler. And what it does is it actually compiles with that specific Java version. So if you run with Java 8 and you say my source and target are 6, you can have a lot of surprises that it won't run actually on Java 6. And if you use this release tag, it will definitely run on Java 6, or you will get exceptions during your compilation.
Right. Underlying, of course, is the fact that if you're using source and target on early releases, you also have to pass along to the compiler the version of the class library you're compiling against. So the resolution will work as it's supposed to work for that release, and not for the next one, because you might have added methods or changed some things. And one of the classic experience we had when we approached new projects was we would establish the contact, ask them, do you guys want to test a new JDK release? Let us know about your bugs. And they'll say, sure, why not? Let's try it. They'll run the test and tell us, you know what? Your new release is totally broken. Everything is broken. Nothing works. We tried running this in Java 6. Nothing works. And we're like, so how did you compile this? As everybody does, source, target, and that's it. I'm like, no, not quite, right? And based on that experience, I think the release also was materialized just based on experience we got and the feedback we got from Maven team saying it would be good to have this built into the JDK and have the Java compiler know about the various basically shapes of the class library to compile against in 9. So with 9 you can basically say it's a release you're compiling against and it will do the right thing for 7, 8, 6 without you having to also install JDK 6 and 7 and so forth, which was not the case before that.
And Maven actually had already a solution for it for years, and it's called Animal Sniffer. And that's where you specify, well, I really want this code to be Java 6 compatible. And you say, well, Animal Sniffer use the Java 6 signature, and then all the classes are compared with those signatures and should build with a success or failure. So.
Right. But okay, if I start using a feature, though, for 9 and start compiling for 9, then my code won't run on 6? I mean, nobody uses 6, right?
I'm still on 6. I'm still on Java 6. 5, 4.
Hands up.
There's one there.
I'm so sorry. But don't worry, Java 9, that's only going to run until September, and then we'll have 18.3 or 10 or whatever it's going to get called. So we'll get moving much faster now. So, I mean, if I don't want to have that balance, then I need to use a feature called multi-release jars, I think. That's the one we have now in 9, which lets me compile code and build code that runs both on, say, 8 and 9, and the VM kind of figures out which one to run. Does that work, really?
The hard part about it is it's probably only interesting for library builders. And it's kind of hard to maintain different versions of the same class. So it is possible. With Maven, we made this kind of pattern. It's in the end a Maven multi-module project, and where you can say, well, this Maven module is for the Java 8 code and this part for 9, and then in the end they're all combined to one new multi-release jar. So that's our concept, but I think it's too hard to maintain this kind of code. So I'm not sure if it will be that popular, but it is possible.
And I assume you haven't played with it yet for Lucene, or have you?
Yeah, no, we don't have anything like that. So you still have the other possibility, of course, to use something like reflection or method handlers to do the same stuff. So you're checking if the method is available, and then you use a new one. But of course, whenever it's something like performance critical, or you are calling something which is internally by the optimizer rewritten to an intrinsic, which means it's no longer a method call in your assembly code that is generated by hotspot, then this won't help, and in that case it would be better to create new class files. But it's really it's hard to do that. So we are currently planning to do something for that, for index and array. So array index checking and all the stuff. There are cool new methods in the objects class, which are in fact intrinsic. So that means they are also optimized away. So for example, if a method calls another method that does exactly the same index check, if it's smaller than something, then it's removed completely, and all that stuff, and that only works with Java 9, so you need to use that new methods to have that, and for that we need something like a separate class file in the multi-release jar. And currently we are doing that using bytecode modifications, so it's something running after the compilation. But it's similar to, it's hard to set that up at the end, because you need two source folders, or the alternative way is to change your bytecode after compilation.
Mm-hmm.
And then assume, okay, so we talked about compilation, we talked about running stuff. What else do people do? Tests? Does anybody here write tests? Good. Can I run my test still?
That's not even half the room. I cannot imagine that.
No, that cannot be.
Can I still run my test with Java 9? Does it still work?
The normal class path, yes, that still works. we're still struggling with Surefire when you're using modules. It is really complicated, that part. And Surefire itself is a very complex project, so we're working on it. It's still work in progress. We just underestimated that part.
The issue is the package names in the modules.
No. The real issue right now is that there are several modules, the Java SE modules, which are not activated by default. So there's this whole issue around that part. But we're still we're working together with Alan Bateman on that, and in the end we will solve it, hopefully this year.
Yeah, the missing modules is something we also fall over because there was something like a famous class, you know, in Java. There is no Base64 decoder.
There is one.
There was no, and it was added with Java 8. So previously, there was a possibility to use some sun-miss class, but this is bad also. But there was something in one module, it was in the core of the JDK, you had it there, but it was in something like in a Java XML RPCs package or something like that, and there was a Base64 encoder and decoder, and a lot of code was using that. And this code did not run anymore with Java 9 because this public class with a Java XML something class name was no longer in the default class path. So that's something, it's a funny story behind because we were not able to have what's going on there.
Yeah, right.
And
that's right. Actually, one of the most surprising things that you'll find out, the SC API in 9 looks by default a bit different than in 8. So, you know when Mark Reinhold talks about ditching Corba, he's serious about that stuff. And so in 9, the SE module API basically doesn't include Corba and all the other EE stuff by default. You can turn it on, of course, if you so desire. And there's actually a weird reason why that's the case, I think. That's because ultimately some of the EE packages that were in SE, like JavaX annotation, this and that, were only, well, a half full glass, which may or may not be a good or bad thing in the 8 world. But in the Java 9 world, having, as you said before, 2 modules have the same packages creates a huge problem. And so on the SC side, we decided to say, well, if somebody really needs this particular version that's in the JDK, they can turn it on explicitly. Or if they don't, they can just bring along the proper package from the EE world and use that instead.
It's just stupid if it's a program that has nothing to do with that, just uses a class because it was available before and was suddenly removed. Or it was not removed, but somehow no longer hidden somewhere. Yeah. So.
But yeah, I mean, speaking of Corba, there is now a wonderful thread on the core libs mailing list about actually removing
Who is using Corba?
There, really?
I'm so sorry.
Yes. Again.
You can still enable it.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Any questions from you?
Yeah.
We have this mic here.
We have a microphone we can, in theory, throw. Is somebody here good at throwing stuff? Because I'm not sure I'm good at throwing stuff, but do we have like a thrower
T-shirts
here?
as well.
Right. We don't have. Yeah, we have T-shirts. I don't know. Anybody want to throw a mic? I was told you're not supposed to kick it, so there is that.
They're all shy.
You're all shy, right? Excellent.
Yeah, excellent.
We cannot hear it, so there's this
we
mic.
need the microphone.
All the way to the back. Excellent.
All the way in the top.
Is it possible to give a Java bean a Bitcoin address or a web service or to attach to it that that it will cost money to operate it.
Do you understand the question?
I don't think I understood the question, so can you translate, repeat?
Yeah,
You can do it in Dutch if you want.
Could it be possible to implement, or maybe it can already be done, but that it is already embedded in the JDK to have, it's actually a feature request to embed a Bitcoin address to a web service or just a Java bean, or so code can be executed only if it is being paid. Is possible to hard code this in?
So if I'm getting you right, is it basically you're asking if there is a Bitcoin or a blockchain implementation in the JVM or in the JDK, right?
Yes.
And if it's possible to use it as a constraint to executing code. Well, the good news for you is that there are multiple implementations of blockchain-like technologies in Java, but there is none of them in the JDK. So, you know, if you wanted, you could probably try to make these things work. Your idea sounds like something somebody should try out and write a blog about at least. That sounds like Hacker News material.
Okay.
Well, I heard about this money and currency at JSR, and there was this original idea to add it to Java 9, but it was rejected, and they're still hoping that it will be added at the next version, whatever version that may be. But you also see that a couple of modules will be removed from the JDK. So, for instance, JAX-B, those kind of modules will be removed. So I'm not sure about if there will be real new modules added to JDK.
Yeah, and I mean, that's one of the questions. At the moment, I think we're at a phase we're trying to basically trim down the JDK or make it more easily trimmable to begin with. Not so much necessarily shed things, but actually make them easier to focus application libraries on just the stuff that they really need. And that, of course, kind of makes it harder to bring in completely new, unrelated functionality into the code base.
And in the end, those will be just extensions, and they will be available in Maven Central. That's what I expect.
Right. So if somebody writes the Java Beans extension for blockchain, we could probably look forward to finding it on Maven Central sooner or later.
I'm not going to write it. Other questions? This is way too easy.
You have to throw the microphone somewhere.
Oh, and the one who catches it has to ask a question.
Yeah.
The support for Lombok in Java 9 is, problematic. Lombok itself is, of course, one big bunch of hacks, but do you think you could support Lombok better with Java 9.02, or is it up to Lombok itself to fix that?
That's really a good question. It really depends on, how soon you want that to happen, because there is only one more release of 9 planned, which is 9.04, sometimes in January, and that's going to be that. And in fact, we started the JDK updates project a week or two ago with the code from 9.01, and we're kind of closing towards the ramp down there as well. So the room to add like new APIs, for example, to better support Lombok isn't really there in something like an updates project. This would be more of a material to consider in JDK major release projects. That's one of the consequences of our new kind of faster release model, where we try to have releases every 6 months. And that means that as a fallout from that, backporting features isn't really something we try to do as much anymore. There are certain kinds of features we would backport, such as cryptographic features. For example, if we raise key lengths in certain algorithms or something like that. But typically, we wouldn't try to bring in a new API in update release anymore, simply because the next major one is coming, 6 months or so down the road anyway. So that there is that part of the question. So 9 updates, very unlikely. And then the other part of the question is basically what Lombok specifically needs from the JDK to be able to be better supported. And I think that's an interesting conversation because from what I know from hearsay, it kind of relies on Java C internals. And by definition, those internals are going to change one way or another as we keep expanding the set of features in the Java programming language. And so that's always going to be some kind of a catch-up game, right? And maybe there's something that can be done there down the road, but I think at least for 18.3, the focus is going to be somewhere else, and say on LVTI and extensions like that, and not so much on making the compiler more hackable, so to say. Sorry. Keep repeating myself.
Okay. Question. What kind of performance improvements did you experience, and where did they come from? I would expect Latin, the string Latin, to improve a lot, but did you see that as well, or did you see other things?
That's one for you.
I think that's a question for me, yeah. We have a lot of performance improvements around everything according to byte buffers, especially direct byte buffers and all that stuff. And that's very important in the case because, for example, in Apache Lucene Elasticsearch, your whole full text index is memory mapped from the file system. It could be something like several gigabytes of index files memory mapped, and you need to access them. So, for example, for sorting documents, you need random access to those values in the slots. And to have that, in previous Java versions, you often need to do something like additional checks. So Java was doing safety checks. If the offset is inside the bounds, but you had to do the same on your side. And there were a lot of improvements. So Hotspot optimizes all of that stuff away. So basically, accessing a byte buffer in Java 9 is now as fast as accessing a native byte array. So there's no need, for example, to use unsafe anymore. The only problem that's not yet solved is 64-bit access to arrays, but that's a different discussion.
Nobody needs 64-bit arrays, right?
Not really.
Not really. Yeah, in times of big data. But that's certainly something that Brian Getz should probably look into.
Yeah.
Right, and I think in terms of performance, also worth of notice, the Apache Kafka project just released their version 1.0, I think a week or so ago. That supports Java 9, and for them, 9 was actually a big feature because a lot of the cryptographic primitives and checksumming primitives are now implemented basically as intrinsics in the VM, and so they run much faster, and so they can benefit from performance if you run Kafka on 9, of course. Right.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we also implemented a LZ4 compression, and this one also runs a lot of faster now. So it's something like C code translated to Java.
Right.
But in that case, but it's the same reason. It's because of all those bounce checks that are done everywhere when you access an array in Java that are better optimized away, for example. But I think the changes in the cryptographic APIs are coming also from that, mostly from that area of improvements.
And then in theory, at least, you can play with the ahead-of-time compilation to improve your startup time, and of course play with J-Link to reduce the kind of JDK on disk and the amount of classes being loaded when application starts up, to basically get improvements in an area where Java traditionally hasn't been the fastest thing around. Doesn't mean you'll be as fast as, say, just running Perl, because everybody knows Perl is the fastest language, right? Perl, anybody? Old people? Okay, fine. But you'll get, a much better out-of-the-box Hello World performance than you had with, say, 8, if you do the right things, right tricks with the ahead-of-time compilation. Questions? Any more questions? Yes.
All the way to the front.
Yeah, all the way to the front. Yeah. Very good.
Halfway.
Halfway. Hey.
Excellent.
So when you're
Close to the mouth. Sorry.
no problem. When you're having a legacy project, actually all our current projects are in Java 8. And you would try to adapt to modules, or at least you introduce a new feature that would use modules. Would you advise to convert the whole project? Or can you mix modules and class path?
You can mix them. But I'm not sure if that is wise. Because if you add a module descriptor, that means that everything you specify must be available. So it's not like you can say, well, I know that this dependency is a real module, so let's only specify that one. That won't work. You really need to specify every module in your module descriptor you want to use.
So you could use it bottom up. If you change at the bottom something, you could introduce modules.
That's the most easy way.
Okay.
But you can go top down, and then I would advise that only application builders should use automatic modules. So an automatic module is a module which doesn't have a module descriptor yet, but you can refer to it based on the name of that file. Or there's another introduction. It's in the manifest file. There you can add automatic module name, I think it's called, and there you can specify the name it will get in the end when there is a module descriptor.
But that does not really help if
No.
it's already published on Maven Central without updated manifest file.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, next.
I think this is the first time I don't get a question. Can
Back
Maven
there,
generate a
back there.
module descriptor?
Over there.
Over there.
Yeah.
Oh.
See, you
all the
should
way
have
to
come
the top.
closer, you know?
Yeah.
Ooh. That's why we said, oh, come to the front.
Right.
Maybe in
Over
between something like what build systems are you using? Who is using Maven? Okay, Gradle.
Your choice.
Your choice. And something else?
Ant?
Ant, for example.
Okay. Make?
Okay.
Okay. No JDK developers here.
Yeah.
Closer.
More close? Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. My question is about data structures. So I haven't been using Java for a while, but what I always noticed is the lack of data structures. So I'm looking for an index priority queue or a graph. I don't see those data structures implemented by default, and I wonder why that's the case and if that's still the case.
So at least priority queues are there.
Right.
But maybe not the one
indexed.
you are looking after.
Now I'm talking about index priority queues
Ah, okay.
or a graph, for example.
Right. So we do have some like core fundamental data structures collections in the JDK. We don't have all the possible iterations of them, and there are many that are useful, like those going over primitive data types and so forth. It's an interesting question whether the JDK would be the right place for all of that, because there are many projects that are in this space. For example, there is a collections framework library at Eclipse that tries to encompass some of what's not in the JDK. There are also more specialized data structure projects for specific, applications. It's hard to say, because in the JDK we have to be careful what we put in, since it all carries a very high cost in terms of maintenance, in terms of potential security fixes, but also in particular in terms of support, since things we put in there tend to be around for, I don't know, hash table has been there for 20 years, right? And vector. Who uses vector? Yeah. The Corba guy. Excellent.
But we got some improvements in Java 9 on that. I have seen a lot of projects using stuff like collections, commons collections, or Guava, just to have something like those initializers for lists, maps, and collections. And that's something which is new in Java 9, and that's also one of my favorite features. So you can now declare some field of type map and already give all the values in an easy way in the initializer. So you don't need something like a static block or other hacks you have seen before.
So in a word, there is hope, but there is not much hope for having like a
Yeah.
huge set of data structure in JDK, because a lot of that is really best handled by other projects. But that doesn't mean we don't learn from others, of course. As we see developers pick up things, idioms, features, then of course we look at those and see which one of those can be made part of the JDK as necessary over time. But then it's also important to realize that trends change over time, and so not everything that's looks like the hot thing at the moment may stay so 5 or 10 years down the road, and then you end up with a situation where you have one date and time library, and you're like, oh, well, it's gone a bit stale, and you add another one, and that one's nice, and maybe in 10 years you have to think about something else, right? And so we tend to be rather conservative about putting stuff into JDK, and that's also valid for Bitcoin. Sorry.
Thank you.
Where's the mic?
I see there a hand. Close, but wasn't hitting the booth.
Yeah, you know the people who've been in this session by the blue bruises afterwards, right? Working with JDK was really hard. Yeah.
Is it easy to use ahead-of-time compilation with external libraries with Maven?
I have no experience yet with it,
Yeah.
so.
I don't think you have a specific plugin for that, right? You would have to basically call it as a command line tool.
Yeah, I think so,
Yeah.
yes.
So there's a specific command line tool for ahead of time compilation called JAOTC, AOT ahead of time, C compiler, J Java, I guess. It's currently x86 Linux only. It's experimental. It's supported for Java base. So it's something you should try out and let us know how it works. But it's not something that you should necessarily expect to work across anything you throw at it, because chances you run into some bug, and we would like to know about it, of course. Going back to the thing earlier, let us know about the bugs you find. That's very valuable feedback. But as we keep improving that technology and keep expanding it, it's certainly going to cover more and more cases that may be interesting. You shouldn't, though, expect wonders from just ahead of time compiling your code. Basically, what happens there is that the time you spend warming up the JVM kind of goes away. And depending on your code, you may be spending a lot of time warming up the JVM because you're, running unit tests, and then, sure, fine. Or you may be just warming up the JVM for a few seconds, and then you're off to the races, you're hot. Yeah. And in that case, ahead-of-time compilation can't really squeeze that much more out of your performance. In fact, if you try to just naively compile everything ahead of time, you end up with really big shared objects, and then the operating system kind of kicks in and penalizes you for that, because you end up having to load huge files into memory.
And also ahead of time, it does not yet know how the code is really executed at the end. So Hotspot does a very good job in doing that. So in general, the advice is if you have something like a long-running application like a server, it makes absolutely no sense to use ahead of time compilation, because you can start the process and it runs for a very, very long time. It's more important for something like command line utilities. So if you're, for example, using Gradle as your build tool, then this would get a very, very large profit out of this ahead of time compilation.
So if you go out of this session and write the next Maven replacement that's native, let us know. All right. Next question over there, please.
This is awesome. We should do that more often.
We should have started with that.
Question about Maven. So right now I'm experimenting with the being able to build my own slimmed down JDK depending on my modules. And is there a way where, or vision that you have about with Maven that it can, next to my compilation of my own modules, can also automatically generate the correct, how to say, slimmed down JDK for me?
So you want to generate have the module descriptor being generated?
Well, no, I think I think that's something we, as the Java developers, we should write ourselves, right?
Yeah. Yes.
It's just like explicit dependency management, but more like I have the whole modules done. I have my dependencies, also modules. Then based upon that, we can probably, just like the JLink, I think, you can get a slimmed down JDK. And is there something that you see, okay, we can get that into Maven that when you finish your compilation, it also thinks, so based on the modules that were in this build, we can make this version of the JDK for you.
Interesting. I think we need to have a look at it. I don't have a solution for it yet. No.
Did you think about turning around the auto generation and say if somebody has a module descriptor that you can figure out to fill in the dependencies in your POM file? It might be an idea. So for example, if you add the other way around. So for example, if you add something like a Java doc comment to your module info file, where you give it the coordinates or something like that.
So what the dependency in the end is, it's a coordinate. Based on that, you can get a file path to a specific file. If you only have the module name, you cannot get that location. So that's not possible.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's kind of sad because I've done this kind of presentation and this question is always coming. I always have to say, sorry, no, I cannot do that. And one of the other reasons... Oh, this is good.
This is good. But you don't see that.
Okay. Please finish. Drink started 10 minutes
Drink
ago.
started in...
Okay.
No, the drinks already started 10 minutes ago.
Okay, so let's finish this question and then let's go out. Okay. One of the things is who is doing maintenance on their POM file and is cleaning up dependencies? Really? This is good, because this is one of the reasons why I don't want to generate that file, because you cannot exclude a module once it's there. So if nobody's doing maintenance on a POM file, and you will generate this module descriptor, you will get a lot of modules which suddenly needs to be there. And you can say, normally with the class path, you can say, I want to exclude this specific dependency. But that's just not possible. Requires really means requires if it is specified like that in a module descriptor. Good enough?
Good enough.
Drinks?
Drinks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for sitting with us.